Welcome to the last podcast of 2024. I'm your host, Jim Jorgensen, and today we'll be talking to Lynn Thoma and Dave Hager about some significant trends in the profession. So welcome, Lynn and Dave.
Good to
Thanks,
see you, Jim.
Jim. Yeah, excited to be here today.
Yeah, you've both been on the pod before, so maybe let's just start with a refresher of what you do for our audience. So let's go Lynn first, then Dave.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks. Lynn Thoma, as Jim said, I'm a senior consultant here at Visante. Help support, Dave on some of our multi-work stream projects and assessments, and then also support the specialty retail team.
Yeah, good. Well, thanks everybody. I'm Dave Hager. I'm a managing director here at Visante. My main function is really to help organizations that may say, you know what, I have an opportunity in pharmacy. I'm just not sure where or to what degree or how best to get started. And I see my job is to help partner with health systems, help really identify those opportunities and make them clear, so that we can work together to get after them. And so it's been awesome to be here with Visante the last 2 years doing exactly that kind of work.
Thank you. Arguably, I think as the largest gathering of hospital pharmacists worldwide, the ASHP Clinical Midyear Meeting is a great opportunity to take the profession's temperature and really see what major themes and innovations are developing. And you both attended the meeting in New Orleans, so let's dive in and get your thoughts on what you observed at the meeting. What do you think were some of the key themes presented at the meeting?
Yeah, Jim. I think Lynn and I just both got off of planes earlier in the last 24 hours here. So I think we're still like trying to digest it all. Every time I think you come back from an ASHP meeting, it's the mix of being away from work, being with colleagues and friends for many years, and then all the content. It's hard to take it all in. I think the way ASHP does it, given their time horizon, I always feel like ASHP mid-year meeting, given all of the time it takes to go into it, the content being developed, it's really a good retrospective on what was hot over the last year, maybe year and a half, for that to get developed. And so to me, it was, three big things again. The first is still about workforce. The workforce issue in 2024, I think, has been top of mind for pharmacy leaders and healthcare more broadly. I will say I feel like the focus has narrowed a little bit more, particularly on that leadership pipeline. I think a lot of concern within the pharmacy profession about the leadership pipeline, particularly recruitment of our HSPALs. And our future in having enough pharmacy leaders to care for patients now and in the future. I think second, most common topic in the hallways or at Pat O'Brien's was drug shortages. I feel like a lot of organizations are still kind of fully recovering from the recent IV fluid shortages. I think a lot of people talking about how the basics, we have it down. We know what needs to be done, but what does that next kind of level look like of being more proactive? How do we have the right data to see these things coming? Some things even about how we, have more real-time production to fill in needs or new partnerships in new areas. And I think a lot of emerging technology in that space as we look for solutions to what now feels like a chronic problem, not a crisis. And I'd say the last area was really cell and gene therapy. These breakthrough therapies continue to come quickly. And what is pharmacy's role in that space is quickly becoming a hot topic, and I think it's going to dominate the conversation in 2025, just given how quickly that topic is rising. So how pharmacy fits in, what our role is, how do we kind of assume ownership of that in 2025 for some organizations is going to be a key strategic priority. Lynn, what did you see?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I want to add on there, Dave, and talk about is just like continuing on that workforce discussion. And again, we just kind of get an overview, sometimes a temperature check at mid-year, but I heard a lot of conversations in the hallways, outside of them, And, this is a conversation that we're having at the national level, the state level, and we're certainly seeing it at the colleges of pharmacy, but the applicant pool, it's down. And that continues to be a concern. So, as we're looking at the pipeline and workforce issues, we also, need to look at, how we're continuing to get quality candidates into our residency applicant pools. So again, not sure what that'll look like when we look at the numbers here after the match, but I assume that that's going to be down this year.
What, at the last mid-year meeting, one of the hot topics was technician recruitment and retention. Anything new on that horizon?
I think, yeah, still hot, Jim, still a topic, still a concern. As far as specifics go, I don't know if I have anything to add that hasn't, been talked about time and time again, but I still think it's something that everybody's talking about. Dave, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of discussion of the problem still. It's always funny, Jim. Every time you have this conversation, everybody has their favorite regional competitor that they lose their technicians to, and it's fun to compare those across the country. It's Chick-fil-A in one region, it's Buc-ee's in another, it's Tim Hortons in a third. You can map out who you're talking to by who they lose technicians to. I think what I heard more this year was really around like how do we get past this kind of phase of doing the same things, and like how do we actually try to like go way further down in the like kind of training process? Like how are we talking more at the elementary, middle school level? How are we encouraging more students to get into kind of more broadly health careers? I think commonly when we think about workforce, we always think about the step right before us. So, right, like pharmacy leaders think about HSBALs, and that's the thing we focus on. I think people who study workforce really think about it from really that origin story of like, how do we get people interested in even health professions to begin with? And on the technician front, I think that's what it's going to take. And I think it's also going to take probably some regulatory and state-based opportunities for change. And I think we'll talk about that, in a minute, on how much that dominated the discussion as well.
Yeah, totally agree. The other thing that has always bothered me is, when you look at the where pharmacy technicians fit in on the pecking order in hospitals, they're always at the bottom.
Yeah.
Rad techs, lab techs, ultrasound techs, surgical techs. And you look at pharmacy techs being required for licensure in many states, accreditation in many states. It confounds me that they're still at the bottom of that scale.
That's a great point.
Jim, that's a good point. This is not necessarily like something that we talked about at mid-year, but just give a little bit of a plug for Ryan Cranon really quick and some of the work that he did in his previous role, but just like had a publication put out there about technician leadership programs. So I certainly think that that's a space that, deserves some recognition and something that people could look into when we're looking at addressing the technician shortage.
Excellent. Yeah, those are some great themes. Any particular perspective shared at the meeting that resonated with you or challenged your thinking?
Sure. I'm going to say it because Dave did it at the meeting. But day one, Dave always does a debate with Jeff Little. It's always exciting, well attended. We get a vote on who wins. So Dave and Jeff talked about the practice model, integrated practice model versus specialist practice model. So that was really fun to hear about. I think that there's, a one clear answer, which, we talk about at Visante and help support at Visante, but the integrated practice model. So, we're definitely supporters of that and believe in it. But again, like that certainly resonated because it comes into the work that we do. And it was just a fun time. I will say that Jeff did a really good job and had some great points related to the specialist practice model. And I think the specialists in the room certainly loved his message. So that would be the thing for me. I think Dave probably has a couple to share as well.
Dave had that good old high school debate background, though, to draw.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we have just thanks, Lynn. We've enjoyed that every year. We've got some, I think, even spicier topics for 2025. I think our the best debate in terms of I guess audience uproar was, when we started with work from home, which is like always fun. I got to try to argue against work from home working in a fully high virtual company. So I think we have some good ideas for next year as well. It was awesome to have Bill Zelmer in the audience, who I quoted during the session, come ask questions and engage with the audience later. And I think there's a good chance that ASH may do some more discussion and say, hey, have we made a mistake by rebranding the Pharmacy Practice Model Initiative? Kind of separating out this idea of practice model, and is it something that we really should go back to and say, yeah, we need to have a standard case and kind of operating model here within pharmacy that we recommend because we think it's the right thing for patients,
Hold on,
or at
one
least
more
reopen
thing.
that dialogue. Yeah.
One more thing before you talk about
Yeah.
the other things that resonated with you is
Yeah.
I just want to say, like, be looking out for those debate topics for 2025 because we talked about them a little bit while we were there, and we know it's a good topic if it makes your blood pressure go up. So, which it did. So, yeah, fun things to come at mid-year 2025. Okay, I'm sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
No, that's good. That is good. Pack more beta blockers. We're getting ready for 2025. On the burnout, so it's something that challenged me. I think it's a really good question. I would say, um, kind of observing the profession, kind of working through this topic of burnout has been kind of very interesting to me over the last couple of years. It was, coming out of the pandemic, by far the hottest topic. Everybody wanted to talk about burnout and what to do. My sense coming out of the meeting was that there's a bit more jadedness about that than there was a couple years ago. I think people have felt like they've tried and really put effort into it and aren't really seeing the results that they were hoping to achieve. And so, um, I think there's been I think more vocal questioning of, is repeatedly getting back to this idea of burnout and surveying and resurveying people. Is that leading to what we want in our staff, or is it just reinforcing this idea that you're burnt out? And so I saw much more focus on joy at work, you know, leadership rounding, where we're instead of doing leadership rounding to check in on progress or safety, but really kind of like we're going to do leadership rounding with a focus on catching people doing good, reinforcing positive culture, stay interviews, succession planning, much more thorough efforts on recognition for the great work that people are doing and more active support in that space instead of, I think, some of the more academic approaches that were taken early on in response to burnout. And I have to say, it was refreshing. It seemed like people were trying new things in that space instead of kind of revisiting some things that didn't seem to be producing much fruit over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think we've had that discussion before. I've never been a fan of those big, giant, 100-question annual surveys. They take a lot of time and they never seem to go anywhere.
Mhm.
I more prefer the shorter pulse surveys. And I know from our last discussion, you don't prefer surveys at all.
I know I am like the most vocal, like even though well, I guess Lynn can correct the record here. I feel like I'm a fairly supportive leader when it comes to employees, but I don't think employee engagement surveys can replace just really good leadership and management practices, doing one-on-ones, knowing your people and helping them achieve what they want to achieve is way better than any survey you'll ever complete in terms of delivering value back to your organization.
Can confirm. At the end of the day, I think, among other things, of course, but people just want you to check in on them and want to know that you value them. So I think that's important.
Anything else on that question or topic?
I don't think so.
Nope.
All right, good points. I think one of the things I always enjoy at the mid-year meeting, and I feel a little remiss this is the first meeting I missed since 1977. Poor planning on my part, but my daughter's birthday always falls on every other year, and most of the time I missed it. But this was a milestone birthday, so discretion being the better part of valor, I stayed home this year for her birthday. So I didn't get to go to the exhibit hall, which I usually really enjoy because a lot of the vendors, you really use this as the time to showcase their new innovations. So I know you guys probably didn't get to spend a ton of time in the exhibit hall, but anything catch your eye when you were in there?
Yeah, sure, Jim. And first of all, we missed you at midyear, so hopefully we'll get to catch you next year. But
Oh,
yeah, I mean, as far as the exhibit hall, like, I mean, we all like know the common themes that are there, but lots and lots of AI, of course. That's again, like, we didn't talk about it in the themes, but certainly like a key theme of the meeting as well. But yeah, saw a lot there. Stopped by, I think, Frederick Ebert has been on the podcast before, so
yes.
stopped by the America Robotics booth. They're doing some really great work with medication cabinet restocking, using a robot to do that work. So that's, super interesting. But otherwise, when we're looking at, AI in general, PA services, teaching, documentation, administration, new applications in sterile compounding, there's a lot of really great work being done there. And I think there's a lot of ways to leverage AI that most of us like aren't used to, sometimes like don't even know about. So just like a lot more to dive into in that space. Dave, anything to add on the exhibit hall?
Yeah, I would agree. It was a lot of, I would say, different layers of AI value addition. I think some folks were kind of just taking their base product and layering the words AI on top of it. Feels very familiar to a couple of years ago, where it was like everything now came with a now with big data label on the side of it. But I would also say, I thought some really novel ways of looking at it. Lynn mentioned many of them, prior authorization services, some really good results from some of the things that we were seeing out there. Um, Applications, particularly in the ambulatory side for trying to reduce pharmacist documentation burden by using kind of large language models to help capture that ambiently, plug it into notes and technology so you don't have to like go back or while you're interacting with a patient, try to click through a million questions or fields. One of the ones that caught a lot of attention, I know, was building into hoods like camera technology that could in real time sort of provide feedback on sterile compounding technique. We have this idea through 797 that we should be able to audit like whether or not technicians' techniques are good. Are you blocking airflow? Are you doing all the required elements, gloves, and those things? But do pharmacists really have time and capacity to observe that, all the time? Like having something like AI in that space, I think would be phenomenal. And so I was starting to see where AI could provide deep value add without really being a threat to like current roles or responsibilities. I think that's going to be kind of like the taboo out there is this going to replace me when it comes to verifying orders? But I was seeing vendors really lean into this idea about like, where do we have just not enough resources to really do it where AI could, really solve longstanding problems that we don't have even human solutions for today.
Yeah, definitely. I also, you mentioned gene and cell therapy earlier, and I did get a note from our colleague Fred Masumi. That's kind of Fred's bailiwick, and
Yeah,
he spent a lot of time in the exhibit hall looking at engineering controls that we might want to consider for gene and cellular therapy as a kind of an enhancement from what we might normally use. And he mentioned that Eurobioconcepts was there, which was one of the leading providers of primary engineering control technology in Europe, and they had a new isolator that he was very impressed with. Very small footprint, hydrogen peroxide decontamination system, rapid cycle, which obviously is good for DNA material, closed trash system, and closed dispensing system. So yeah, I think we're starting to see companies up their game too, just in terms of the technology associated with this gene and cell therapy.
it's great. Yeah, the last thing, I think Lynn covered it really well, but just like you can tell that there's been a response by vendors around this chronic lack of technicians, and so they're trying to find ways, right, to like reduce the need for people. Lots of discussions again on automation and robotics in terms of just getting drugs around, getting them to the units on the inpatient side. It can't be just all tube stations and people anymore. Like there's got to be more durable ways to consistently and safely get drugs to patients. And when you bring in that human factor, it just doesn't add that much protection nor value. And even some discussion around downtime of like when you study those delivery run technicians, how much time do they actually do deliveries and how much time are we doing maybe non-value added technicians in that space? Jim, did you ever catch one of your delivery techs maybe not doing productive things on a delivery run?
Once or twice. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I was going to add to Dave is just like when we talk about like, AI and obviously like there was a lot of that at the meeting, it feeds into those workforce issues and it feeds into burnout. So there's a lot of things that are interconnected here. Yeah. And just how can we use AI when we don't have people? Because obviously, it's an issue in healthcare right now.
Yeah, maybe linked a little bit to AI. How about personalized medicine and pharmacogenomics? What was the buzz around that?
Yeah, certainly. So that was, we didn't hit on it earlier. That was one of the themes that I had written down as well. I think that it's still a buzz. It's still a hot topic. But also still a little bit like controversial as far as like the value that it adds. And so still lots of conversations being had around that as far as like Dave mentioned it earlier, but some of that hallway chatter. So, maybe a presentation on that, but still some questioning behind the scenes as far as like, is that something that we can use and gain value from as well?
And I wonder what you guys think about this. I feel like in some ways, as healthcare gets more complex, I think we're kind of seeing where it isn't going to be necessarily like what it was like 50, 80 years ago, where everybody had to stock prednisone, right? Like you didn't have many choices around it. Um, it may be that cell and gene therapy is not going to be at every hospital and health system in the US, right? It isn't going to make sense for every critical access hospital in the United States to have a cell and gene program. It may not make sense for everyone to have a pharmacogenomics program. And so there's going to be, as healthcare get more complex, I think differences in who needs to pursue these things. And I just think you're seeing really uneven uptake there. And I guess a bit of a caution to anybody listening is like, just because it was hot doesn't mean it's always applicable to your site and location. You're gonna have to do some deep thinking about like, how do these new trends impact my site? And is it super relevant or are there other things that I need to do instead?
You both have the unique opportunity to work around the country in a variety of different health systems. So, how did the themes you observed relate to current challenges or trends that you're actually seeing in the field?
Yeah, so I thought I saw, there's lots of overlap, right? At the end of the day, the things that we're working on for our clients are always the problems that we're facing day to day. So many of the things we've already talked about are just the same as the conversations that we may have with a client walking from place to place, or even some of the solutions that Visante may be providing. I'm going to focus on two. I think the first was site of care restrictions, particularly in the infusion space. A lot of discussion, again, more in the hallways than anywhere else around kind of new restrictions in that space, particularly kind of there's been this looming thread of action in the oncology space, and we're seeing again sort of an uneven application of those new restrictions in oncology across the country, and really what that means for individual sites when certain higher cost specialty infused products for oncology patients need to be delivered in a lower side of care, while the very toxic low cost drugs are being administered in those HOPD locations. And just what that does for the patient experience, the provider experience, what that means for the health system themselves, and just trying to pull that all together. I think a general sense that people know they've got opportunities in the infusion space, but really feeling that organizational friction in terms of different sites owning different components and not really having a cohesive strategy. And then kind of getting frustrated that it feels like right now the payers are dictating to us instead of us having a proactive strategy to deliver value back to the payers. That could be more of a win-win environment for all those groups.
Yeah, right. People starting to get the feeling that, if site neutral payments aren't in your area yet, they are going to be very shortly.
Exactly. And I think people are nervous about what that means. And then I think are just feeling that tension of, my strategy up until this point has been just to dig deep in preserving our hospital-based infusion programs and just like tripling down on that. And now they're wondering if that strategy, how much longer that strategy is durable, even though that has been like a really good service for patients that has, been financially very viable for them. It's how much longer can I try to hold the line here? I think people are really feeling that. And in some organizations, pharmacies deeply involved in those decisions, and in others, not so much. And I think really, having more pharmacy engagement on that negotiation side and understanding that landscape within your region is even more important entering 2025.
Yeah, I think it's imperative that they have a long-term strategy for infusion because, if you get caught not ready and you lose those patients, it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get them back.
Well said. And that's what we, see everywhere across the country is people don't know how much they've lost or where. And when you don't have that kind of understanding, it's really hard to build the case around like what it would take to bring that back in. And it's kind of one of those things, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. And so I think finding groups to partner with who can help answer that question for organizations about what is the opportunity in that space, what's the trend in that over the last 5 years specific to your organization is an important first step to understanding then once we understand the scope of what's happening, how do we put in some solutions to do it? People can look at their infusion P&Ls and see, a really nice up and to the right graph as we've added, higher cost infused products in those spaces. That may not tell the whole story.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point too about, not really knowing what the full market actually even looks like because a lot of those infusion prescriptions don't get generated electronically. They still get written out, and if you don't capture them, you don't even know they were written.
100%. And, that's one of those things where I've had more than a couple conversations where people have promised me that we won't find anything leaving their organizations. And then later we have a different conversation with some data. And they're surprised to gain a new perspective on some of the things that might be taking place in their organizations. And you'll talk to people at the front lines and they're like, yeah, this really nice person from this private equity backed infusion suite provided some really easy tools for me to get my patients serviced. And those things aren't anywhere within their EMR.
Yep, exactly. Any unanswered questions for you guys that came out of the meeting?
Yeah, I would say when it comes to unanswered questions, the biggest unanswered question of the meeting is we have, just a huge change in our political landscape at a national level, honestly, obviously. We're hearing a lot right now about potential like key administration leaders, particularly in the health space, that I think are causing a lot of questions about what does the future of 340B program look like? What does the future role of HRSA look like? What does the future role of vaccines look like in our healthcare delivery system? These were these were big topics, again, really more in the hallways and over dinner, where, boy, there's a lot more guesses and bets to be placed than there are answers right now. I think that led to some really good debates in those environments about what people think the future might look like. Probably one of those things where if we knew for sure, we'd all have different day jobs. So I think a lot of focus on what does that look like and when will we even get clarity around those issues. I think AHA and others have been talking about this in terms of like we're not exactly sure where it's going, but there's been, I think, some holdback on the health system sides of making investments as we enter 2025 because of this uncertainty. You almost have to protect yourself right now before you make major bets when you don't know exactly what that landscape looks like. Um, lots of discussion about 340B and the rebate model, where that may go. And Lynn, I know you had a lot of those conversations with your colleagues. I don't know if you wanted to share anything there about what people are thinking about in that 340B space.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like 340B, Dave, like it's a lot of the same discussions, a lot of uncertainties there. I will say, I mean, just like pivoting from
Yeah.
340B, like Inflation Reduction Act. So lots of conversation here and how that like intersects with 340B, right? So that was certainly a conversation, impact from that being, small to large as we look at lower drug costs and lower out-of-pocket costs and no donut hole. And I mean, I actually like had a conversation about that every day at the meeting and then had a client call where the client had questions about how that's going to impact them and just all of the things that our clients and others like need to be thinking through as far as what are they going to need to consider? What are they going to need to do for patients? How does that impact specialty pharmacy? And yeah, just I mean, we could have a whole podcast about that, Jim, like to be honest. But I think like yeah, that's the major thing that I just kind of wanted to tie together is 340B and then IRA and what is that all going to look like in 2025? And just I mean, ultimately a lot of unanswered questions, right?
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know, Jim, but like, what has your experience been when it comes to this topic of politics and healthcare? I feel like it is like more often mentioned now than it was before, but maybe you just have smarter friends who've been talking about it for longer. I do also think that there was a lot more focus at the state level with a lot of innovations coming out of the state. What do we got to do to work better with our pharmacy examining board or whatever it is in your state that governs pharmacy practice? Because so many things right now are happening quickly within healthcare at a state level. And I think there's a lot of focus on not only engaging through national organizations like ASHP, but the state affiliates in order to make change happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is a tremendous amount of churn circling around the political landscape in healthcare right now. And the one thing that I think this gives us an opportunity to do is maybe connect closer with our hospitals' lobbying forces, make sure that they're well educated on the pharmaceutical issues that concern us and how those might fit into some of their larger lobby efforts.
That's really true. I think so much of that sort of legislative effort can be recycled across state from state, and people can learn from one another about what the best approaches are. And I think that's got to be an area of focus in 2025 is how are hospitals and health systems really partnering with others across the state to have a consistent message in this space, partnering with their physician colleagues, nursing colleagues, broader healthcare organizations to have a consistent message about the importance of, consistent and effective health policy. Just with so much kind of, I think, going back to the states in 2025.
Exactly. And maybe one last question for you guys. One of the most valuable elements, I think, of any meeting like this one is the chance to network. So how were the networking opportunities?
It's the best part about it, Jim. We love the networking opportunities. I mean, they were, as usual, great, not just like the formal ones, but the informal ones, you know, when you see people like on the sidewalk or in the exhibit hall or wherever else. So, I mean, I think that Sunday was full of, you know, receptions for colleges and pharmacies. I know that that's certainly like where I was on Sunday. I think that Dave was there for UW as well. Ohio State had their big 65th like anniversary celebration. So everybody was out cruising on a boat. So that was super fun. If anybody's from Indiana is listening, I'm just gonna tell you that we need a bigger room next year. So well attended, which was great, right? But the space was too small. We were hot and it was crowded. Otherwise, you know, Visante did our reception on Monday, which was also, you know, wonderful. We rented out some space at Antoine's. So, you know, thanks to our team for putting that together. It was just a great time to connect with our folks, but also, you know, with our clients and some other, you know, pharmacists in the field. So we just really enjoyed that time and had some good discussions. Dave and I are also, if anybody hasn't been, you know, following along on LinkedIn, we're recruiting right now for some consultant positions. So we were able to have some great discussions with people who might be interested in those positions. So yeah, overall, Jim, as always, the networking, it was the best part. I'm sure Dave has comments about hurricanes or other things to add, so I'll let him answer as well.
Well, I would give one bit of advice, which is next year I will plan not to miss the last step as I'm carrying Christmas ornaments back down the stairs. Because twisting my ankle before spending the week in New Orleans on cobblestones walking around with an ankle the size of a grapefruit would not recommend, and Lynn did her best to contribute to that for some reason. So I enjoyed the networking out at New Orleans is great for it, right? Like talk about one of the better venues, I think, for having these types of networking events that ASHP has. Like this is definitely one of them. Just so many different pockets where you can have some great conversations, whether it's on a you know porch overlooking Bourbon Street or wherever you know want to take it. I'd also say, you know, as a fully virtual company like Visant, like just the opportunity to network internally and to take a break and just really connect with the just amazing team we have was really rewarding. Like we were able to bring some of our kind of new to consulting first year consultants out there and really get to spend time with them in person instead of doing that, you know, on a client site, like having the downtime just to really get to know them as people even better, and just time in person was super invaluable. So you know, those are the kinds of things that help build teams and help build teamwork. And I thought we would have done better with you there, Jim, but we did okay in your honor, trying to keep the morale up. I don't know that I'll say it's my solution for burnout in 25, but I felt pretty good coming back.
Excellent. Thanks. So the last question, Dave, you twisted your ankle, but did you save the decorations?
Yeah, the heirlooms are all intact, so you know Hallmark will be fine. Luckily, they were the empty boxes going back down the stairs, so we were okay at the end of the day. So
Excellent. Well, great discussion today, and thanks for taking some time so soon after the meeting to be with us. And also for our audience, don't forget to check out the annual Visant Top 10, which will be out shortly, highlighting the top 10 issues for 2025 that we think pharmacists should be paying particular attention to. So thanks again, Dave and Lynn, and thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
thanks, Jim. Bye.